Now you were elected in 2005. What was the driving force that brought you into politics and made you want to stand in the election?
Well, I was always interested in politics. I was brought up to be interested in politics.
Yeah, I understand your father is he the mayor of Doncaster?
He is the mayor of Doncaster, and I was brought up in Doncaster. And at the time, he's not in the Conservative Party now, but at the time he was. And there aren't many Conservatives in Doncaster. And as soon as I was old enough to deliver leaflets and knock on doors, and he had me out delivering leaflets and knocking on doors, and I loved elections. Absolutely loved elections, and we never used to win any, but it was great fun, and so that sort of stimulated my interest in politics. And so wherever I was, I always used to join up to the local Conservative Association and offer to help at elections. But I never really sort of expected to get into Parliament or even had a driving motivation to do that. But it got to the stage where I lost faith in politicians of all parties, really. And
why did you lose faith?
Because I got to the stage where I thought that nobody ever seemed to stand up and say the things I wanted to be said. Okay. And I think for a democracy to work, for a parliamentary democracy to work, everybody in the country's got to feel that somebody's speaking up for them. And I got to the stage where I felt that nobody was really speaking up for me. And I just thought that rather than going down to the pub on a Friday night and complaining about it, you should try and do something about it yourself. And if no one else was going to say the things that you wanted to be said, well, you should go and say them yourself. So that's what stimulated me into wanting to get onto the candidates list and stand for Parliament.
Okay, and what do you feel you've achieved since May 2005?
Not enough, but it's always harder in opposition to achieve things when a government's bringing in things that you can't stand and knowing that they can get their business through with a majority of over 60. But the two things I think I would like to think anyway is I would like to think that one, I've represented my constituents to give them a very high level of service in terms of the speed of dealing with them and the accessibility of dealing with them and tackling the problems and getting involved in local issues and local campaigns and always being about and available. So I'd like to think I've helped make politicians more accessible to my constituents, for one thing. And the second thing that I'm probably most proud of is that I think I have raised things in Parliament that if I wasn't there, nobody else would have done.
Can you give me an example, please?
For example, launching the Better Off Out campaign in Parliament. I mean, until then, there was no MP would openly stand up and say we should leave the EU. And now in our joint Lords and Commons Better Off Out group, we've got about 35 people who are openly members of Better Off Out, and I think that the nature of the debate in Europe about Europe has changed. You know, it is now discussed about leaving the EU in a way it was never even talked about before. I think some of the things about on climate change would never have been mentioned. I've made speeches criticising sex education in schools and things like that, which was another taboo subject that nobody was ever able to criticise. Some
of the elements of you don't believe sex education should be taught in schools? Parents should do it themselves?
I don't think more. Well, that's if you don't mind, a slightly simplistic précis of my position.
No,
it's not. It's not a question of I don't believe it should be taught. I think that I have many concerns about sex education taught in schools, and my point is that actually the fact that people propose the solution to teenage pregnancies and unwanted pregnancies is more and more sex education is just ridiculous. I initiated a debate on that, quoting what happened. I spent months looking at what happens in other countries around the world, countries like Holland and Italy and other countries that are far better, to show that actually sex education was not the solution to that particular problem. And I think that whether people agree with me or not, I'm quite proud of the fact. I think there are people who certainly do agree with me, and I would like to think I've at least given those people a voice in Parliament, that they can look and think, well, actually somebody is actually speaking up about things in a way that if I wasn't there, I don't think anybody else would.